So, Rowan is the Boston Butcher. Lachlan is a leather worker and also decks himself out in leather while on the job, but not once does Fionn go around wielding a scythe. Missed opportunity, Bryn! Anyway, this is my spoiler-filled discussion of Scythe and Sparrow by Bryn Weaver. So, right off the bat, this is my least favorite of the trilogy. All three of these books are nowhere near masterpieces, but at least with the first two, I was able to have fun with them. Mostly for this third one, I was just bored. So what did I like about this book? I think it's safe to say that Fionn Kane is probably my favorite of the brothers. His characterization is surprisingly good compared to Rowan and Lachlan, who both have exactly 2 personality traits each, and one of them is horny. Now, I wasn't wild about the resolution of his arc. Basically, he spends his entire life thinking he took out his father, despite the fact that he was around 8 at the time. In reality, it was Lachlan who dealt the final blow, but while we're here, how did a kid that young land a hit that precise? It'd be one thing if the wound was just a graze and Fionn didn't actually stabinate his dad, but I guess he's just a prodigy when it comes to human anatomy, huh? That is just one of the many logical inconsistencies in this series. Also, the pacing and the action scenes are good. There's still inexplicable time jumps that kind of throw off the overall timeline. I was incredibly discombobulated in the middle of the book when we're trying to weave in scenes from the first 2 books into this narrative. But when we're focused on Fionn and Rose's relationship, the pacing evens itself out. And speaking of Fionn and Rose, I actually enjoyed their romance. Not as much as Lachlan and Lark. They're still my favorite. Leather and Lark is my favorite book in the series. That opinion will not change. Lark is also the most competent of the multiple deleter girlies, but that's a discussion for another day. I'm still reeling about the fireworks. Like, how did she get away with that? Okay, I gotta focus on Scythe and Sparrow. But these two have some good tension. The scene in the fight club where she gets knocked on her ass by one of the other competitors, and he just sees red and starts wailing on this guy. And even though we've now seen this man's true darkness come out, he's still so attentive to Rose. He goes over to see if she's okay and kind of tenderly grabs her face. That's a microtrope I really like. The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy does this too. They have a lot of really good moments, but I gotta say, the spice has not improved since book 1. The scenes are formulaic, we're still using uncomfortable verbiage. There are phrases that keep getting reused ad nauseum. The prose as a whole is pretty repetitive. Here, I have an example. Her brow crinkles, period. Thick, dark lashes flutter, period. She groans, period. Her eyes open, inky pools of pain and suffering, period. And then later, Rose's liquid eyes stay fused to mine, dark pools of molten chocolate. Same chapter, 3 pages apart. This is what I'm talking about. If I'm stopping every 5 seconds to mentally edit what I just read, then the prose is not good. And it just gets worse for the intimate scenes. Also, the cotton candy thing, not that bad, especially when you compare it to some of the other stuff that happens in this series. Although I do take issue with what happened there at the end. Fionn, you are a doctor. Don't put that there. So to recap, the things I liked. Fionn's characterization, the pacing, the action, Cranwell getting his comeuppance, most of the romantic scenes. But, and I hate to say this, the main reason this is my least favorite book in the series is Rose Evans. My favorite thing about Rose, because I don't entirely dislike her, is the fact that she exclusively goes after abusive men. Women will come to her, and once she hears the phrase, "take flight," she will go and take out their awful, awful partners. But the biggest issue I've found after reading 3 of these books is that this series runs on convenience. These books expect me to take at face value that Sloane, Lark, and Rose are so good at what they do that they can just get away with it scot-free. But when you have Sloane taking so long to set up these elaborate macabre displays, Lark having an impromptu 4th of July celebration in the woods and throwing cars over busy highways, and finally Rose attempting to break into a car on a busy street. Presumably, she was shopping. There has to be people walking around. No one walked by and went, "Hey, why is that girl in a cast trying to get into some dude's truck?" But credit where credit is due, at least Lark and Sloane put thought into their scheming. Rose, on the other hand, says she's going to make a plan and then immediately scraps it and goes in guns blazing. The botched schmurder that acts as the exciting incident only goes wrong because Rose doesn't take the time to think. She does not have an adequate weapon to take down a man 3 times her size. And this is what I mean when I say the series runs on convenience. She's very lucky this man lives practically in the boonies. He's a farmer. It is convenient how Eric Donovan's truck is just magically unlocked. If you're smart, you'll lock your car before you attempt to hit on a woman who's not your girlfriend. And then on top of that, she forgets to put her phone on silent, and it rings halfway into their drive. Because she's just in the back seat, with a fiberglass cast on, by the way. See, the narrative is trying to frame her as competent, but because of stuff like this, I don't believe it. But I will say, Fion's ringtone being "Somebody Get Me a Doctor" by Van Halen is very funny. Then after she successfully gets Fionn to help her dispose of the body, they simply never find it. This man is just presumed missing for the rest of the book. Rose spends a lot of time worrying that they're gonna find Eric, but it's wasted because they never do. Yet another convenience to add to the convenient Sunday. Even when Cranwell was rightfully onto her, I was just like, whatever. Nothing's gonna come of this. Everything's gonna turn out fine because there are no stakes. And Rose doesn't even end up taking him out at the end. That could have been her time to shine in that haunted house. You know, when he's chasing her around at that Halloween gig, he looks so goofy when he comes to her tent to terrorize her. But instead it ends up being Fionn's time to shine as he comes to her rescue. He is the one who ends up taking out Cranwell, and it's a good scene. And the fact that that's followed up by their first kiss is actually pretty great. It's like a slightly better executed version of the cabin scene with Harvey Mead in the first book. But the good times end there as Finn tells Rose to leave so she doesn't get into trouble, and he ends up calling Leander Mays, his brother's boss, to come dispose of this body. And can I just add, there have been people walking through this room where this man has just been schmurdered, and they're just laughing because it's Halloween and they think it's all a show. Which is actually fine. That's like a horror movie staple. I can believe that. But all Leander's reappearance at the end did was make me mad. Because what do you mean you're threatening to expose Rose's activities to the FBI? The FBI has been nowhere in this entire series. They are so inconsequential. And here you are giving me the illusion of stakes. And even though Fionn is now beholden to Leander like his brother is, the only real thing that comes from it is that he's gone for 9 months. He's away from Rose. Who's fine, by the way. She had a little whoopsie uh-oh at the end of Leather and Lark, but in the end she's fine and they live happily ever after. And then there's the epilogue. I'm not talking about the first one because that one was great, but the second one is from the perspective of a very minor character from book 1 who is inexplicably getting her own book. And I spent the entire first half of that confused because I had no idea who this woman was. So anyway, Scythe and Sparrow, an underwhelming end to a fun yet frustrating trilogy. But hey, at least Rowan Kane can rock a dragon onesie.